Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this episode, we're not going to have a whole lot of action in terms of building parts or doing work on the car, but we are going to go over some of the new parts that I have recently acquired for it to move the project along further than it currently is and or was. So we'll start the video off with a little clip that I filmed yesterday of one of the parts that is now installed on the car. And I filmed the clip then because I wanted to do a little bit of work off camera on it after I showcased it, and I did not want to wait until today to do so. So we'll cut to that clip now and be back in a few minutes where I can show you it on the car and explain its function and implementation onto the project. And in my collection of new parts here, actually it's this box, we have one of my favorite recent acquisitions, which is this Peterson remote filter mount. And this thing is really quite cool. Now it's set up for number 12 inlet and outlet for the oil filter. As I stated in the last video, this is set up for small filters, small Ford style filters, using a 3/4 16 thread that does correspond to the thread of a factory oil filter for the Supra. So I can use the same Wix filters that I've always ran on this car. I can continue to use those. All will be well with that, and I don't have to memorize a new part number. So the one part that I wanted to show you guys that I think is just awesome is it all has to do with this section right here. So let me go ahead, set you guys down so I have use of both of my hands, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is really quite cool. And you can see that this 2-bolt flange is rotated from your guys' perspective, should be a little bit clockwise from sitting parallel. And I'll take this Allen and we'll loosen the bolt out. And if I sit here, I still can't rotate it. Why is that? Well, on the inside here, if you can see those two alignment dowels, as well as the series of drilled holes around the actual filter housing itself, they have this set up in such a manner that it only uses a single bolt for retention, while you have a very large variety of index locations for it. So you can clock this all different ways. I mean, you can go, here's my other hole, there we go, 90 degrees from center line. You can invert the bracket if you need the filter housing to hedge downwards, so on and so forth. And you have complete rotational control of your mounting solution for this. So I already went ahead and I drilled the holes in the mid plate where this will mount, and I have my 3 permanent marker marks scribed onto here to notate where this needs to sit at, as I had the intent to show you guys this in the video, and I did not want to search around again to determine where this landed at. So now that we are good here, I can put this back together, get my Sharpie marks off of it, and I can install this once and for all and build the new lines for it that you guys will see either before or later in this video, as I'm not sure when that's going to happen yet. Just determines how things play out in the production of this video. But just a neat little part I wanted to show you guys, and this is a Peterson part. It is part number 091312, as you can see on the side of the box here. And if you guys need a remote filter mount, highly recommend this. I am very, very stoked with that, the Peterson remote filter adapter housing, whatever you want to call it. And it's now installed in the Supra here, and the last 2 oil lines are completed for it. So now the oiling system is a sealed system, or at least all the feed and return lines are completed, with only the breather lines outstanding. So in here there was just the perfect little pocket right down here where these 2 lines run to. That is the filter housing right there, and there's plenty of clearance to my 2 brake lines. I'm not sure if you guys can see them. Where my middle finger is, you can see those 2 nipples there. Those are the brake lines for the rear of the car, and I have my filter housing that just mounts to the mid plate. There was a perfect space between the adapter plate and the mid plate mount that's welded to the side of the frame rail, and that is a perfect location for the oil filter to be, to not create a gigantic mess when it is time to do oil changes on this car. So beyond that, I have roughly put in place my oil filter delete. I have the feed line from the top of the pump that snakes around to the inlet of the Peterson filter housing. Then the outlet of it runs to the filter delete right here. And if you can see, there's also the oil pressure sensor that is housed in that filter housing as well. So all of that packages very nicely out of the way, but still in a good location for changing the oil filter when it comes time to do oil changes on this. So beyond that, we have the radiator out, and the harmonic balancer is no longer here. It is on its way to Florida, back to Titan, to be exchanged for one of their V1 dampers. So while this is off, there are a few other parts that will be swapped out and implemented into this. They're over on my white bench there, so let's go over and take a look at them. So we have a nice little box here from my friends at Induction Performance, and you can see I'm also wearing their shirt. The box is open. The shirt is the packing material for it. So Matt and the rest of the crew at Induction, thank you very much for supplying me with these parts and the really cool shirt. You can see the front of it here, and the back of it has their it's an illustration of their green Supra that they call Booger. It's engine bay with big Pro Mod turbo and all the other fancy parts. It's a badass car and very, very fast and very cool setup on that thing. So from them, we have this guy right here, which is just a new crank sensor, new OE Toyota. The one that's on the car, I'm sure it would still function, but it's a little bit worn out, and while I'm in there and changing things up on the front of the engine, I figured it would be a good idea just to replace this sensor. I'll keep the old one as a backup, as it always did work before, but at least now there will be a brand new one being used on the car, and we'll not have to chase any gremlins because of the sensor, hopefully. Beyond that, we have this guy here, which, let me get it out of its bag. There we go. And what this is this is an OE Toyota 2JZ VVTi crank gear, timing gear, and reluctor wheel. So what the benefit of this is over the factory 2JZ GTE non-VVTi timing gear and reluctor wheel, there's a couple of benefits. So the first of which is this is a one-piece unit, whereas the timing gear that is on the engine currently is two-piece. And if you know much about 2JZs, and I guess 2JZ GTEs to be more specific, it is commonplace and essentially a necessity to weld the reluctor wheel to the gear itself. It's common for those to separate, and at that point you sink as to where the engine is at in its rotation, and the ECUs don't really like that, and your car won't run correctly, and you could end up causing undue damage to the car. Beyond that, if you look at the pattern around the reluctor wheel on this, this is a 36 minus 2. So 36 little nubs minus 2 teeth right here, which would signify the start and or stop point of where it's reading, where the crank sensor is reading. So that compared to the wheel that is on the car currently, if you guys can see it down there, I believe it's a 12-tooth trigger wheel that these things come with factory. So why is more teeth better, you may ask? Well, it equates to more data points, and the more data points that you have, the better idea of where the engine is in its rotation and in its cycling that you have. So you can be more precise with timing events, more precise with knowing where the engine is, and it just provides more data for a more defined and better tune, I guess, for lack of a better description. So this is an OE Toyota part. It is part number 13521-46040. So you can see right there if you'd like to pick one up for yourself. Like I said, this is the OE Toyota part. However, Powerhouse Racing also offers a billet timing gear and reluctor wheel. It's a one-piece design as well that is, it very closely, if not completely, mimics this VVTi gear here. So highly recommend that for anybody putting a 2JZ together, so you don't, or a 2JZ GTE rather, so you don't have to screw around with the factory reluctor wheel and the factory setup that has the propensity to become two pieces and cause you some undue issues. So that will be swapped on in the hopefully not too distant future, but not a job for today. But beyond that, we also have parts here that are represented, or parts here representing Titan Motorsports. So I have some of their old cam gears on the car, and they work fine, but they're not the most sightly things in the world, and they offer a better solution at this point in time. So my buddy Gabe there was nice enough to send me these, and these are the new Titan Pro gears. So very nice design. You have a 6-bolt retention system on it, so that way you're not going to have any deviation as far as where you have it set in terms of degreeing cams or anything like that. And what I may end up doing, if you guys remember, I have a Hall effect sensor that will be the cam sensor for this setup. And with the cam gears that are on the car currently, I would end up having to have a pocket milled into one of them and epoxying a magnet in place so the Hall effect sensor has an idea of where the cam is located in its rotation. So these, I have an idea that I may be able to pull one of these bolts out on the cam gear that's going on the intake side and use the hole for it to sink the magnet into there. Now I have to test that theory once I pull the timing set off and put this gear on. I can tape the magnet on, power the Hall effect sensor, and see if I can get a reading with it positioned in place, or with the magnet positioned in place of one of these bolts. But again, we're not diving into this thing incredibly deeply today, at least not tearing the front of the engine apart more at this point in time, but that is at least the idea, and these gears, beyond looking awesome, should help me with that more than the ones that are on it currently. So again, Gabe and the crew at Titan, thank you very much for sending these out. I can't wait to get them put in the car. They look awesome. I know they'll function awesomely, and always happy to have your guys' parts on the silver car. And the final bit that we have is this guy here. We have a China special Mil-spec wiring kit. This J Ready company, or JR Ready rather, they are an Amazon retailer, and they sell Deutsch connector kits and I guess their version of Mil-spec pins. So this particular kit, it's a, how many pieces is it? I think it was mid 500 piece kit, and it comes with all that you see here. So we have all of our barrel pins. These are the female side right here, and then we have the male side over here. So these are nice little pins that you need this particular crimper to make them work, which we'll go over the crimper in a moment. Beyond that, we have all the different Deutsch connectors. This is a 4-pin female right here, a little rubber weatherproofing right there, so that's pretty neat. Have all the tooling and everything else, so that stuff right here. Blank pin block offs. We have the crimper itself, which, if you guys have ever done any Mil-spec wiring or seen, I think Kevin on the KSR YouTube channel, he has featured this tool before, or a tool similar to this. So the way that it works, you have this dial right here where you choose the wire gauge, and that in turn determines how tightly the little teeth here crimp it. So if you can see, I squeeze the tool down, you can see those 4 little teeth that come in. It's a ratcheting deal, so it's stuck right there. So you have to finish the crimp in order for it to release. So we squeeze the rest of the way. There would be the finished crimp. Let off, the teeth retract, and you have a nice crimp that will hopefully hold the wire in there without any issue. So have a couple of buddies, they've used these kits on their cars, one of which is a very, very fast Camaro, and had no complaints with it. So hopefully this it will work the same for the silver car, and for the price, I mean, you really can't beat this. So I guess this ended up being, I think it was $450, somewhere around there, and you'd be hard pressed to find just the name brand tool for much less than that, let alone all of the connectors and the pins and everything else. So it ends up being an awesome deal, provided that it works correctly and works the way that it's anticipated to, which we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully it doesn't cause a nightmare for Bob and Sean with the wiring on this thing, but they both have experience with these kits and they've had good luck, so I will put some faith in it, and hopefully we continue along the same path as them. The last, I don't know if you can call it new parts, but at least the new materials are these pieces of aluminum right here. So we have 2 pieces, I think these are 12 by 16, if I remember my dimensions correctly, and then these 3 pieces right here are 8 inches wide and 36 inches long. And what those will end up becoming, and I guess what we can work on a little bit today, those will be the puke tank, the burn down tank, the giant catch can that we mounted in the rear of the car. Now I can't finish the tank today, but I guess we can at least get started on it, as I need to go and get a few weld bungs, and I'll end up having to make a couple of Y blocks to make it work the way that I want it to. But we can at least go ahead, take these materials, at least the top and the bottom. I'll end up tacking these 2 pieces together, scribing out the dimensions that they need to be cut to. I can cut these 2 pieces, one will be the top, one will be the bottom respectively, and then these will serve as the sides of it. So I can get the top and the bottom made, I can cut the sides out, tack everything together, and I guess in theory I could weld the sides up, but we'll see how far we get here. We're going to go ahead and start on the puke tank for this thing, so that way we're a little bit farther with that, and then when I have time this upcoming week, or when I feel like placing an order for the bungs and what have you, is I want to get a little bit trick with the internal baffling and the internal architecture of this, for lack of a better description, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So let's go ahead, I'll tack these 2 pieces together, and then we can draft out the shape they need to be cut to, make those cuts, and start moving forward with this tank. There we have the basic form of the puke tank. So it fits exactly where I wanted it to. I didn't want it to sit up on this portion of the body, as it will be difficult for you guys to see, but it raises up right here. So that would end up with me having to do some funky stuff with the shape of the tank to make it fit there properly. So it sits pretty much on the sheet metal that I had replaced here, as well as the portion of the factory metal that is on the same plane. So it's set up with nice outside corner joints the whole way around, and the sides and the bottom are tacked together. The top here is still loose. Sorry about that. All right, with the top of this off, we sit roughly where it's going to end up. So have this kind of squared off triangular shape to it that fits perfectly alongside of this portion of the parachute bar and provides us with a pretty significant volume in terms of how much this thing can hold before it starts to overfill. So I think the inlet and outlet will be somewhere on this side here, and my plan is to put ORB bungs like I always do, so that way the AN threads and the tapered portion are replaceable. And I'll likely run number 16 lines back to this, so because I'll be taking the 2 breathers off of the dry sump tank, as well as the 2 breathers on the top of the valve covers, and merging those together so that way I don't have 4 lines running through the car, but rather have just 2. So those will come in on the sides here somewhere, and then I will come on the inside of the tank and put pieces of aluminum tubing that direct any blow-by or the large volume of exploded oil that this thing is meant to contain. Will blow it downwards, so that way we are less likely to have that volume come up through the exhaust stack that will be going somewhere through the carbon hatch here. So if we set this down and we look at where the tank sits, I think the exhaust stack, pretty much where I made this little circle in the dust here, it will be somewhere in this area, maybe backwards a little bit more. I'm not quite sure yet. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But we have this whole portion of it completed, or at least tacked together for the time being. And that gives me the general shape that I need to determine what tubing I need for the those blowdown sections in there, what length I need in terms of the exhaust stack, and I can figure out the other materials that will be necessary for this. Maybe some perforated sheet metal to put on the top of the stack to prevent falling debris from entering the tank. Not that that matters that much, but just a thought. I need to put some sort of a drain on it as well, which I'll more than likely purchase another one of these ORB drains here. Got this from Vibrant, and I really like the design of it. It's a really smart little piece, but all considerations that I will have to ponder and figure out exactly how I want to implement into the design of this tank. But let me pop the hatch again. And there we have it again. So if my calculations were correct, this should be a 3-something gallon tank. I've calculated it based off of the initial rectangular shape this had, but obviously we've lost some of that volume with the shape this had to take. So I think it should be 3-something gallons, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, who knows. But whatever it is, it will be more than adequate for this thing, and I've taken up pretty much all of the space that I can with this tank the way that it's shaped now. So happy with how it's coming out so far, and I can get the other pieces ordered, get them mocked up and everything, which will be the subject of probably next week's video. But we'll get this tank knocked out, and I can figure out how exactly I want to mount it on here. More than likely some riv nuts, as we usually do, but that'll be a bridge to cross in the not too distant future. So with going over the new parts for the car and building the beginnings of the puke tank for the Supra project, I think that's probably going to be about the end of this video. I know this was a short one, but I just ran out of time this weekend to do much more on this car. I had a variety of other things to do and wasn't able to allot as much time as I would have liked to making progress on this. But that just means that come next weekend, we can really double down and make some very solid progress on finishing that tank and moving forward with other portions of the project. So with that in mind, thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, I know it wasn't as long of a video as I would have liked to have made, but at least we have some content for this week. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.